Kurogane had known there would be a lot of people present, but it was one thing to know it and quite another to be in the middle of it. The cacophony of voices began to overwhelm him again, and his heartbeat started to pick back up. Focusing, he grabbed for his tail, letting the air around him fill with the woody, earthy smell of vetiver oil. He inhaled deeply and closed his eyes, the world quieting as he focused on steadying his breathing.
Oh, is that vetiver? Nice!
Kurogane let out a yelp and jumped, fur on his tail standing on end, eyes flying open as he looked around for who'd spoken. A gasp.
Oh, sorry! I didn't mean to startle you!
Standing in front of him was another heteromorph, the majority of her skin covered in short brown fur. Large, curved ears stuck straight up out of her longer, straighter gray hair, and leathery membranes were folded on either side of her lanky arms, stretched between 4 extra elongated fingers. Her upturned, leaf-shaped nose and very pronounced fangs drew Kurogane's eye. The energetic expression around those features made them oddly cute. Kurogane settled, falling back into step towards the building.
Oh, no problem.
But yeah, it's vetiver. It helped me focus and filter out the white noise. The Batgirl gave a nod.
I can have trouble focusing sometimes, so I use it while I study.
She paused for a moment, thinking, then cocked her head with a chuckle.
So thank you, because we're about to take a test.
Kurogane felt himself beginning to grin back. That smile was infectious. The girl reached out, revealing a humanoid hand tucked under the wrist and elongated fingers that supported her wing's membrane. She held it out to Kurogane for a handshake.
Oh, sorry, I forgot to introduce myself. My name's Komore Akane, but please, just call me Akane.
First name basis right off the bat? Wow, she's pretty relaxed. Good thing I didn't say that loud. She'd think I was making a joke about her quirk. Or would she have liked that? Kurogane took her hand and shook it, hoping she wouldn't be able to feel how sweaty his hands were. Oh, I'm Shirasaki Kurogane. Nice to meet you, Akane.
Same here,
Akane replied peppily, turning her head over her shoulder to look back at the doors to the school, then back to him, her smile not fading for a second.
Good luck, Shirasaki. You seem nice. I hope we'll be classmates.
Kurogane nodded, feeling better than he had before. Thank you. That'd be nice. Akane nodded back.
Yeah, see you later.
Without further ado, she dropped to all fours and spun around to run through the crowd towards the entrance, moving with an odd loping gait. Kurogane watched her go, wondering just what bat species her quirk was. Making a new maybe friend before even entering the building was unexpected, but good. The written tests had been more difficult than Kurogane had anticipated. He thought he'd learned nearly everything there was to know of hero history and law. His dad was a school teacher and had helped him study, and yet some of the questions had been so obscure he still wasn't sure of his answers. Now came the part Kurogane had actually worried about, as all of the few thousand applicants filed into and sat down in a huge auditorium, a significant amount of nervous, anticipatory chatter echoing off the vaulted ceiling. The only light came from white glowing sconces on the walls and a trio of large blue screens at the front of the room, behind a stage that was currently barren save for a simple podium. Kurogane found an empty seat about a dozen rows back from the stage. As he waited, he held his tail across his lap, fidgeting with his fur. A flicker of motion, a familiar flash of leathery membrane. He turned to see Akane waving to him from a handful of seats over and 2 rows forward, as the last few applicants made their way to their own chairs. Kurogane waved back. The girl sitting next to Akane rolled her red eyes, long black hair hanging down her back. This is serious. Act like it. Akane crossed her wings across her lap, ears flicking backwards.
I am serious. I just wanted a friend to know I support him.
The other girl gave an annoyed sigh, furrowing her forehead. I saw you outside. You've only known him for, what, like 5 minutes?
Well, sometimes it's all it takes,
Akane replied, her tone firm but not unkind as her eyes flickered over to look at Kurogane. Kurogane nodded back to her. Thank you. Akane nodded back and looked away, so he did too, eyes scanning the dark room, and then landing on none other than Kenji Imasuji. The tall, muscular blonde-haired boy was sitting about 5 seats down his row, and shifted upright as he noticed Kurogane. The two stared for a moment. Kurogane was surprised to see no scowl or look of rage from Kenji, but he couldn't get a read on what his former tormentor was actually feeling. His face was just unreadable. Before either could say anything, a man with tall, spiky yellow hair and what looked like a miniature speaker system around his neck stepped out from a nook off stage left and took the podium at the front of the room. The babble of voices from the surrounding seats quieted as President Mike, renowned professional superhero, radio star, and the announcer and English teacher of UA High School, casually ambled up to the podium.
Welcome to today's live performance! Let me hear you say, "Hey-ya!" he announced, a voice full of passionate enthusiasm.
The response from the prospective students was a tense, nervous silence. This was shattered by a shout of, "Hey!" from Akane. Several students around her jumped or jolted from surprise, and Kurogane's tail stiffened under its fingers. Up on the stage, President Mike gave a good-natured chuckle.
Wow, we've got an energetic one this year. I like it.
Apparently, silence was the usual reaction. Kurogane recalled hearing something about how the final war had been exceptionally hard on Present Mike, though he didn't know the exact details. But whatever it had been, the man on stage seemed just as enthusiastic as he always had whenever Kurogane had turned into his radio show as a kid.
Alright then, hopeful students, listen up. I'm here to present the guidelines and setup of your practical exam. Are you ready? Present Mike shouted from the platform. Yeah! Kinda yelled back, a few more voices joining her. Yeah!
The red-eyed girl next to Akane facepalmed with a growl, slouching forward in her seat.
Okay then, you should each find a pamphlet under your seats, Present Mike began. Please read through it. It contains additional information that's relevant to your exam.
There was a general shuffle as everyone bent down and rifled under their seats.
Alright,
Present Mike continued, pressing a button on the podium. The screens behind him changed, now showing a diagram. 10 different maps, each one a different layout of streets and buildings.
After this presentation, you'll be entering replica cityscapes, where you will have to disable, not necessarily destroy, 3 vague villain types. Each type is more difficult to defeat than the previous one, but also worth more points as well. The 4th villain will be present as an arena hazard of sorts, and is worth 0 points.
As he read the handout, Kurogane's eyes widened as he learned something about the enemies in question. Wait, the villains are robots? But, Quirk's no good against machines. No, it's okay. Your body is still strong, and you know how to fight. Not to mention your sense will still work on yourself to buff you. You can at least take some of them out, right? In the hushed gasps echoing around the room, multiple other prospective students seemed to have the same worry. Kurogane looked up to see more than a few wide eyes and panicked expressions. Present Mike tapped the speakers on one side of his neck, the sound echoing throughout the room.
Now don't tune out yet! This next bit is important, especially for those of you with quirks that don't quite hit as hard.
Kuragane's head snapped around to look at him, ears angled forward to catch every word.
Now, 5 years ago, we realized the entrance exam needed a revamp. If you turn into the sports festival that year, you know what I'm talking about.
Kurogane thought back. Oh yeah, someone with a mind control quirk hadn't gotten to get into the hero course because his quirk didn't work in the exam. Hadn't remembered much else. He kinda ended up being one of those heroes that keeps a low profile, I think.
So, we instituted a little balance pack to the exam since then, President Mike announced, pressing a different button on the podium.
The screen behind him changed, showing a silhouette of a person speaking to one of the foe villains, a 4-legged robot with what looked like 2 tentacles spreading from its back. As they watched, the robot suddenly turned and started fighting against a different one.
Now the foe villains are programmed with a database containing all applicants' quirks, and will react accordingly to their use. After all, most villains a hero goes up against are gonna be human, so it's only fair our testing dummies act like it.
Kurogane sighed with relief. Okay, so they react to your sense just like a person would. He heard several other students give little relieved huffs as well, the closest being a boy with sunglasses and blue hair across the aisle from him.
You're allowed to bring any equipment you wish with you into the exam. Attacking your fellow participants or sabotaging their efforts is strictly prohibited and will result in your immediate removal and disqualification from the exam. And that's it! Let me leave you with a sample of our school motto, President Mike concluded. As General Napoleon Bonaparte once laid down, a true hero is one who overcomes life's misfortunes. So, you all ready to go beyond? Give me a plus ultra! Plus ultra! Kane shouted and jumped from her seat,
several other students once again hollering with her. President Mike smiled in her direction, knowing look in his eyes. Looks like that little lady's already got a big part of being a hero down. Inspiring people and boosting morale. No surprise, given who her old man is.
Then please, proceed to your assigned testing areas, everyone. Good luck!
Bakugo's shoes clicked on the linoleum flooring as he stepped onto the observation deck. His eyes looked over the screens that displayed live feeds in the testing arenas, currently just empty seats and deserted buildings. Opposite the screens is a seating area, currently filling up with alumni and faculty who were settling down to watch the exam.
Over here, Bakugo kiddo!
A young woman with frog-like features was waving to him from her seat with one hand, gesturing to the empty seat next to her with the other. Bakugo returned a wave of his own as he walked over to her, noting that Soji had already taken the seat to her other side.
Hey, Tsu.
He sat down next to her, looking to the screens to watch the prospective students file into their assigned testing arenas. Tsuyu Asui, known to her friends as Su, made an observation.
There's a lot of heptamorphs this year, even more than last time, kiddo.
One of Shoji's arms morphed its end into a mouth, which he spoke with as casually as the one on his face. Then we truly have made a difference, haven't we? Bakugo scanned the lines of entrance on the screen, remembering a talk he'd had not too long ago. Finally, his eyes landed on familiar white stripes, and he smirked. Hey Shoji, you got a fanboy down there. Middle row, third screen from left, white stripes. Shoji looked at the kid on the monitor, brow furrowing. Ah, there. I've definitely seen him before, but... from that hospital waiting room, after the battle. The mouth he'd formed was smiling. Kurogane filled with his hail as he stood in line with the rest of the smaller, but still sizable crowd of prospective students waiting at the section of the vast, open-air courtyard that was the waiting area, ringed by high and imposing walls. The noonday sun beat down overhead, and the temperature inside the courtyard was sweltering. The sweat beading on Kodagane's brow was as much from the heat as it was from nerves. Good thing they'd only been waiting for a few minutes at most. Once more, he took deep breaths and used lavender scent to try and calm himself down. Careful with that, though. You don't want to go noseblind before the test even starts. "Hey, have I seen you somewhere before?" a voice called from behind him, words flavored with a strong Okinawan accent. Kodagane once more gave a shout and jumped, tail standing on end. Why do people keep surprising me today? It was times like this he was glad his quirk wasn't actually skunk powers, or he might have sprayed someone by now. He turned around to see a girl with shoulder-length blonde hair and yellow slit-pupiled eyes standing just behind him, wearing a nice-looking blue dress with golden embroidery. A matching blue hair clip in the shape of a curling dragon adorned her left temple. And Kodagane actually could have sworn he'd seen her before. Maybe? You kinda look familiar. The girl nodded, looking him over, then gasped in recognition, revealing sharp teeth like Kodagane's mother and sisters. Oh wait, you were there when Rattel won the women's championship, weren't ya? She jumped the barrier, ran into the front row, and hugged you and a woman with a Wolverine quirk? Kodagane blinked, thinking back to that night, the roar of the crowd and the glare of the lights. Sakuya, better known by her ring name Rattel, had indeed ran over and tearfully embraced him and Mom after she'd won her first women's championship match. She'd been so happy. This girl must have been seated somewhere in the crowd nearby. Oh, right. You must have a really good memory. The girl gave a chuckle. Nah, I'm just a huge wrestling fan. So are you like her son or something? Kodagane's eyes widened, and he quickly shook his head. No, I'm your little brother. But don't worry, you're not the first person to get confused by the age gap. The girl's expression changed slightly, becoming a bit more somber. Is that hard for you? Being the younger sibling of someone famous? Kodagane paused, thinking about it. Sometimes, yeah. There have been people who only wanted to get to know me so they could get her autograph. But me and her have always gotten along great despite that. She helped me train for today and everything. The girl nodded, her expression softening a little. Same with me and my sister. We're tight, but it's tough when people only think of me in terms of her. She offered her hand out to Kodagane. Tatsuma Kyoda, but call me Kyoda. 2 people on a first name basis today? Kodagane thought as he reached out to shake her hand. Shirasake Kodagane. Tatsuma, wait, see you? He was interrupted by a growl from the red-eyed girl from earlier, standing in the line next to theirs. Is no one taking this seriously? Kyoda rolled her reptilian eyes. We're gonna be classmates if we make it through this, so we might as well get to know each other. You can take something seriously and still be friendly. That's how most bros do it. Helps calm down the people they're saving. Kodagane looked back over at the red-eyed girl, who frowned back at Kyoda. He couldn't help thinking from the look on her face that she had something to prove. The girl opened her mouth to retort, before a hissing sound filled the air, and her gaze shifted to something behind them. Kodagane turned to see doors opening at the base of the courtyard wall, rays of light shining through and momentarily blinding him. Whatever, the red-eyed girl muttered, crouching down and laying a hand on the concrete flooring of their waiting area. A red-hot glow spread from her fingers, the material melting and then reshaping into a long sword. Several applicants in her vicinity stepped back, Kodagane included. The girl hefted her newly made weapon, glaring at him and Kyoda. Just stay out of my way, she spat, dashing past them and through the doorway. Kyoda didn't hesitate to take off after her, and a split second later Kodagane found himself running after the both of them. Concrete gave way to asphalt beneath his feet as he burst into the testing ground, the vacant skyscrapers of the artificial city towering up around him. Well, good luck, Shirasaki, Kyoda called, tossing aside her hair as a burst of wind and smoke suddenly erupted around her. Kodagane's eyes went wide as her silhouette doubled in size through the smoke. Spiked reptilian wings unfurled from her back, and a tail sprouted from her rear as her entire form shifted. The smoke cleared, revealing a dragon about the size of a bear. Blade-like foreclaws clicked and scratched on the pavement. Scales the color of golden citrine plated her arms, legs, tail, and back, while the skin on her throat and beaked muscle was still human-like, soft and pale tan. Along the undersides of her arms, the scales transitioned to short, fuzzy golden fur. Her dress was still in place around her torso, a short cape of fabric draping down over her tail. It must have been specially made to stretch to accommodate her transformation. A quartet of sharp teeth jutted upward from the back of her jaw like tusks. Tucked spikes of blonde hair crowned her head, and when she turned to give him one last look, Kodagane saw the blue hair clip still in place. I was right. So she is. Tsuyu watched the tests begin, her eyes straying to a specific screen. Golden wings unfurling as a dragon in a blue dress stood up. Over there, that must be the little sister Tatsuma-san told me about. A top hero's little sis? Bakugo asked, watching the dragon on the screen lash her long tail and flex taloned hands. She looked somewhat similar to the dragoon hero's dragon form, at least at first glance, but there were several differences he immediately noted. While his class had taken up a good number of the top spots in the last 5 years, Ryoko Tatsuma had hung on to 9th place, which begged the question, shouldn't she be in the recommendation exam instead? Tatsuma-san said she didn't want to get in on a recommendation. She wanted to prove herself, get up. The explosion hero gave a smirk. The little dragon girl wants to get in on her own merit instead of having Big Sis hand it to her. I like her style. It's becoming increasingly common, actually, Choji remarked with his arm mouth. Ever since what happened with Endeavor, and all the increased oversight and public scrutiny, the number of recommendations has become fewer every year. People want to avoid accusations of favoritism and nepotism. A hulking machine with oversized arms bigger than the others, with the number 3 emblazoned on its forearms, swiveled its cameras over, filming Kyoto's transformation. State-of-the-art sensors scanned her, and her profile was retrieved from a database. Tatsuna Kiara, quirk, Drake. She's able to assume a draconic form which possesses flight capabilities, in addition to increased strength. Target acquired, it announced in a robotic voice, dashing towards her, its footsteps leaving cracked scars in the asphalt. Kyoto roared and vaulted into the air, swooping forwards before driving her claws straight through its chest, cleaving it in two with her raw strength. She gripped the halves in each of her taloned hands, dragging them aloft like osprey with a fish, and flung him into another robot farther down the street, one of the 2 pointers with its curving stingers. Katagana blinked in awe, then shook his head. Don't get distracted. Looking around for his target, he spotted one of the 1 pointers, small, single-wheeled robots with 2 arms, rolling out of an alley. Alright, let's start small. The robot turned as it charged at it, laying its eye on him and scanning him to bring up its profile. Shirasake Katagane. Quirk, skunk. He is able to produce various scents from his tail in gaseous or liquid form. Liquid form is more potent and has rapid, heightened effects. Olfactory sensors activated. Target acquired, its artificial voice crackled as it dashed forward. Katagane spun to the side to dodge the robot's fist as it slammed into the ground. He swung his tail outwards with a spin, sending droplets of purple liquid splattering directly into the robot's face. The robot's sensors registered the scent, skunk spray, and the machine began emitting coughs and gags from its speakers, hands trying to cover a non-existent nose. The eyes on anyone are vulnerable, except Red Riot, Katagane muttered to himself, jumping towards the stumbling robot and slamming it directly into its eye, a move he'd seen Saki use in the ring. The camera's lens shattered to pieces on impact, and the force of his jump sent the robot toppling over onto the asphalt, where it lay still. Alright, that's one. He stood up from his fallen quarry, looking over the machine for any flaws he could exploit. The biceps on these and the 3 pointers are both pretty thin, and not very heavily armored. Maybe an intentional weak spot? A series of loud clanking, crashing noises rang out, and he turned, seeing a 3 pointer charging at him. Katagane dashed forward to meet it, narrowly dodging a series of forelimb slams that almost knocked him off his feet from the impact. He finally jumped on top of it, painting a foul-smelling purple liquid over its optics with his tail as he passed over its face. The massive machine recoiled, reacting to the sulfur-like odor, as well as the opaque liquid obstructing its vision. Not wasting a second, Katagane acted on his hunch and delivered a dropkick to the arm connector. While the armor wasn't soft, it was just as thin as he suspected, and the impact tore the limb free, sending the robot stumbling to the ground. Katagane ran up its back as it tilted, spotting a 2 pointer sprinting down the street towards his falling comrade. He jumped off the 3 pointer to land on the scorpion-like machine, swinging his tail over its 3 optics and seeing it into an artificial coughing fit. Thinking fast, he slapped one hand on its metallic plating. The disoriented robot brought his stingers down with impressive speed. Katagane just barely managed to jump off and out of the way before the sharp barbs could spear him. The twin lances instead struck the robot's own body, neatly impaling it through the center. Okay, so that's 6 points. Not bad, but I'm gonna have to do better, Katagane muttered to himself, standing up from the asphalt and looking around. No more robots here just yet, and he was the only student left within eyeshot of the entrance. Taking them out one at a time isn't gonna be good enough. He racked his brain, trying to figure out a better strategy. I could try and lure a bunch. No, that won't work. How'd I deal with them all at once? He could feel himself beginning to panic again, his breathing picking up. He grabbed for his tail to release some vetiver, before he stopped himself. Now, save the scent buffs for later. I'll need them when I'm tired, and if I use them too much now, I'll go noseblind. Just try to calm down the old-fashioned way. Do some deep breathing. Then, a mighty crashing noise echoed out across the street, shattered glass raining down around him as a 3 pointer crashed through the skyscraper to his right, hammer-like forearms slamming into the asphalt as his faintly purple glowing eyes stared at him. Katagane cried out, freezing in fear, all his hair standing on end and ears pinning back against his skull. As the titanic robot tensed itself to pounce, a screech echoed from above. A small, brown-winged, familiar figure swooped down, from her perspective seeing a web of heat signatures beneath the machine's armor. Picking at the weakest part where the heat was closest to the surface, she folded her wings and plunged onto the target. Claws latched onto his arms to hold him out of the way, while her teeth sunk into the small gap of his short neck, tearing out wiring. The robot collapsed to the ground, and Akane stood up from its shoulders, spitting. "Hey, Shirasaki!" she called out to him, lifting one wing in a wave. "You okay?" Yeah, Katagane stammered back, his raised hackles lowering. "Good, you really shouldn't zone out like that," Akane replied, pausing to take a breath of her own. "Yeah, I know, it gets me in trouble," Katagane admitted with a blush, before realizing Akane was focusing on him to the point of not noticing her surroundings. "Get down!" he yelled, lunging forwards onto his hands, shooting his tail upwards and over his back to launch a splatter of purple liquid over Kane's head and into the face of another 3 pointer that had run through the gap left by the previous one, sending it staggering back as it initiated its pre-programmed reactions. Katagane ran underneath the arched legs of the bot that Akane disabled, before leaping off the ground and kicking the active 3 pointer's weak joint, shattering it and sending the robot scattering to the ground. He might want to work on not getting distracted either. Akane coughed at the foul scent of sulfur, covering her nose with her wings. Yeah, I'm working on it, same as you. Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to, Kurogane panicked. Akane shook her head, fanning the smell away with her wings. Oh, it's fine. My quirk just gives me a good sense of smell. And as for the other thing, well, we can work on it together. Ears pricking up, she abruptly vaulted airborne and dive-bombed a one-pointer that rolled in from a side street a few seconds later, using the claws on her feet to rip its head off. Hey, shouldn't it bother you too, though? Before he could answer, a pair of two-pointers clanked their way out of an alley on the other side of the street, zeroing in on him. Thinking fast, Kurogane whirled around and flung a spray of purple fluid at them, dodging their stabbing attacks for a few moments as their assistants processed the scent of lavender and reacted accordingly by getting drowsy. Their movement slowed, becoming uncontrolled and sloppy, and he was able to easily jump and smash through the gaps in their armor to take them out. That's 11 points. Remembering Kane's question, Kurogane shook his head. Oh, no, actually. I can choose whether or not I'm affected by my own sense. The red-eyed girl was surrounded by several destroyed pavilions, their bodies speared through with black, almost obsidian-like blades that jutted up from the asphalt. A three-pointer rounded the corner, looking at her and bringing up her profile. Akiba Homura. Quirk, Forge. She can superheat inorganic matter she touches and mold it into any shape she chooses. Target-sided, the machine bellowed as it charged, pointing up for an overhead swing of its arm. Mellow twisted to the side, reaching a hand out to slap the robot's arm as it crashed into the pavement where she'd been standing a second earlier. No matter what it takes, I'm getting in. Underneath her fingers, metal superheated until it was red hot, twisting into a gauntlet around her right hand. I'm getting my provisional hero license. In her mind's eye, she saw not the harsh angles and wire joints of the three-pointer, but a beautiful woman in a white dress, her figure reflected dozens of times over by the mirrors that surrounded her. Homura gave a raw scream and punched her metal-plated fist in the robot's face, cratering its armor and sending the machine skidding backward. Then, I'm coming after you. Kyoto roared, grabbing two three-pointers by the head and crushing them in her claws. She was smaller than her sister, but her raw strength was more than sufficient. That's 45 points. I don't want to destroy too many and leave none for the others. Kyoto had wanted to prove her mettle on her own, but she knew she still had a bit of a head start on most everyone here, and a quirk perfectly tailored for the situation, even if her sister had refused to divulge any details on the exam. Kyoto appreciated that Ryoko had done that. There was no point in aiming for the top score at the expense of everyone else. She saw a girl try to fend off a three-pointer with a hydrokinetic quirk, but her aim was poor and she was forced to focus on defending herself. As the machine prepared to swing its arm down on the girl's head, Kyoto flew up behind it and impaled its back with her claws, then ripped upward and tore it in two. Kyoto watched the girl scamper to safety, yellow eyes narrowing. These machines are designed for one purpose. She spun around, a swipe of her tail sending two one-pointers flying across the street and into a replica storefront. If you're ready for UA, they're cannon fodder. If you're not, you'll be overwhelmed quickly. Kurogane dodged the three-pointer's attack, the thrashing of the robot's limbs clumsy as its computer simulated a drowsy reaction to the smell of lavender. Not wasting a second, he jumped on top of its back and landed another elbow drop to its neck joint to disable it and send the machine something to the ground, immobile. I'm at 27 now. Is that enough? Kanye was no longer with him. He hadn't seen where she'd gone. A yell rang out, and Kurogane turned to see a muscular-looking boy with orange hair and red eyes landing powerful blows from the boxer stance on several of the machines down the street, smashing them to pieces, each blow seeming stronger than the last. Kurogane took off running towards him, skidding to a halt as the last robot, a one-pointer, was sent crashing down the street by a well-aimed punch. The boy planted, putting one hand against the street lamppost to steady himself. Dang it, I didn't think this would go on this long. The one-pointer struggled back to its feet, and the boy's face flashed with alarm, before Kurogane brought his foot down to the back of its neck, nearly beheading it. Straightening up, Kurogane looked back at the older boy and waved his tail, a faint cloud sprang through the air. The boy blinked, sniffing. Peppermint? It tends to energize people, Kurogane called back as he looked around, spotting another pack of faux villains charging down the street toward them. The other boy inhaled, clenched on his fist, and smirked, straightening back up. Yeah, I do feel energized. Thanks. My quirk wears me out if I use it for too long. He then leapt forward, incredibly fast and far, coming to a landing on the face of the three-pointer in the lead. His fists hammered the metal with increasingly powerful punches, until it was shredded and dented, exposed wires visible in between the armor. The boy hopped off the corpse of the robot as it collapsed to the asphalt. Why'd you help me, though? This is a competition, he called back to Kurogane, raising his fists again, eyeing his circling two-pointer. Well, this means the world to me. Kurogane dodged several striking blows from a different two-pointer to let a spray of lavender to his jaw, before smashing through its neck with another drop-kick. I figure it does to everyone else, too. Another three-pointer charged Kurogane, only to stagger back as a small, black, cat-like creature jumped seemingly out of nowhere and tackled the robot's face, claws slashing at the camera lens. A girl with pink hair and some kind of crystalline thing embedded in her forehead skidded to a halt next to Kurogane, watching the cat tear the robot apart. She said, glancing away from the carnage to look Kurogane up and down. You don't seem very strong. Her tone of voice held no malice and mockery, just what she saw as a simple fact. Katagane held himself back from reacting. Yeah, I've heard that a lot.
2 minutes remain!
President Mike's voice boomed across the arena. Clearly there were hidden speakers somewhere. Or his voice was just that loud. Okay, 2 minutes. I guess now's the time, Katagane muttered, gently taking hold of his tail and bringing it around in front of him. When I disperse my sense normally, the effects are subdued. Lavender only makes someone relaxed. A large droplet of purple fluid formed out of the tip, smelling strongly of peppermint, far stronger than what he just emitted. When they're in liquid form, they're much more intense and their effects are much more pronounced, like outright making someone fall asleep. He painted the purple fluid on its own chest and began to breathe deeply. As he did, he looked up in time to see yet another swarm of robots around the corner at the far end of the street, charging towards him and the others. We're giving someone a huge boost of energy with peppermint. He charged forward at incredible speed, jumping higher to throw purple fluid onto the three-pointer's cameras, sending it into an artificial coughing fit before slamming both feet back down on its neck, nearly decapitating it as wires tore and sparks flew. Katagane leapt off the collapsing three-pointer and plunged a one-legged diving kick onto a one-pointer's camera to shatter it, before dashing out to another and breaking its weaker arm joints with a pair of lightning-fast kicks. Spinning around, he charged towards a two-pointer and jumped into the air, giving it a face full of skunk spray to stun it before he grabbed its stinger and shoved it downwards, gravity and momentum aiding him in bending the barb deep into the robot's own torso. As he came down on the asphalt behind the staggering two-pointer, Katagane struck a near-perfect three-point landing, tail waving proudly in the air. Skirmish was over in a few seconds. 35 points. The pink-haired girl stood in the middle of the street. Her hands were up in a defensive position as her cat ripped at a two-pointer's underbelly, but she was still watching Katagane, her eyes wide with surprise. The boy Katagane had helped earlier smirked at her from the other side of the street as he beat down on a one-pointer. Still think the guy's weak? The girl shook her head, her mouth upturning into a small smile. Katagane stood up from his landing, then gave a jump, his fur standing on end, as the two-pointer he'd just killed hit the pavement next to him with a loud clank. He quickly shook it off with a nervous shake of his head before he ran forward, smashing through another one-pointer's arm with a roundhouse kick before leaping off to land on the shoulders of another. I've only got maybe a minute at most before I go noseblind, and I won't be able to do this again for a while. He struck the robot's neck with one of his knees, sending it tumbling to the ground. It didn't get back up. 36 points. Suddenly, the ground began to shake, sending him stumbling to his knees. A towering, gargantuan form erupted at the under end of the block, sending the cracks zigzagging through the asphalt as it loomed over the city. A square head covered in glowing red camera eyes leered down at the group, clawed hands pulling a massive, vaguely humanoid body free of the earth. Akane swooped down, dragging a one-pointer across the pavement and flinging it to the last group of normal-sized robots in the vicinity, before banking on a diamond coming into a landing next to Katagane. Oh dear, the cherub Terran heteromorph gasped, looking up at the Colossus. Katagane struggled upright from where he had fallen.
That's the gimmick President Mike talked about. Hannah, run! I'll buy you some time, yelled a black cat-like creature, sprinting down the street in a flash and jumping for the zero-pointer. Sebastian, no! The pink-haired girl screamed back.
The feline creature landed on the titanic robot's leg and tried to bite it, only for another limb to swipe it off with no effort. As the creature hit the ground, its body faded into a stream of glowing energy, which snaked back down the street and merged with the gem on the girl's forehead.
Okay, I think that's our cue,
the orange-haired boy shouted as the girl stood there, stunned. He took her by the hand, surprisingly gently, and started to pull her away.
Come on!
Katagane felt the last of the scent boost drained from his body, leaving his muscles aching. Now was not the time to push my luck. He turned and ran at the other boy, Akane following hard on his heels. The quartet dashed through alleyways and side streets, but the machine kept pace easily, tearing straight through the buildings in pursuit of its quarry. Then, a clarion roar echoed from the skies, ringing out above the sounds of shattering glass and falling debris. Skidding to a halt, Katagane looked back, perhaps against his better judgment. Kyoto swooped down overhead and bashed her fist into the zero-pointer's chin, her full body weight knocking it upward despite Kyoto being several dozen times smaller. Seeing it next to her made it clear just how much smaller her dragon form was compared to her older sisters.
Huh?
Katagane gasped, watching Kyoto fly a series of quick looping passes around the zero-pointer, golden claws slashing at its head to keep it focused on her.
Kiara?
That's it. Focus on me, Kyoto thought, dodging a swing of one massive metal-plated hand. I know I've got enough points to pass. I can afford to buy the others full time to focus on theirs. She dove beneath another SWAT and slammed full force into the zero-pointer's armored chest, managing to stagger it back slightly. Why is the little dragon going after the zero-pointer? Bakugo asked, leaning forward in his seat as golden claws raked across all drab metal, sending sparks flying. She knows it's not worth anything. Tsuyu followed Bakugo's gaze, moist brow furrowed. She's got the highest villain point score, kiddo. Think she knows that? The applicants aren't informed of how many foe villains are deployed, so there's no way for her to be certain. But it's reasonable for her to assume that if she's destroyed more by a large margin, then she's a shoo-in, Shoji replied, multiple eyes on the tips of his limbs tracking Kyoto's swooping flight across the myriad screens. She's throwing it away from the other applicants. It's kind of funny when you think about it, Tsuyu noted, giving a smile. Kurogane could hear the sounds of Kyoto's wing beats and roars echoing out behind him as he ran, her strafing attacks keeping the zero-pointer distracted, before a meaty smack and a high inhuman screech rang through the air. Kurogane skidded to a halt and spun around in time to see a golden blue blur strike the asphalt, the impact kicking up a plume of ash and sending clumps of rubble flying. Akane also hesitated, crouching as if to vault into the air, ears pointing upright and fur standing on end. Another cry rang out from behind the pair, the direction they were originally running, and Kurogane pivoted to see the orange-haired boy and the crystal forehead girl take fighting stances as another battalion of smaller robots ran into creek corner up ahead. He could feel the ground shake with every footstep the zero-pointer took, the tremors that rippled up through his feet growing stronger and stronger as the Colossus lumbered towards his position. A glance told him that its myriad glaring red eyes were laser-focused on Kyoto's downed form. He took a breath and made a choice. Everyone thinks they're split up so people who knew each other prior to the tests can't back each other up. But there's only a rule about hurting each other, not helping each other. Get up. Kyoto shook off the rubble kicked up by the impact, broken asphalt clattering to the ground as the dragon struggled to her feet, tail lashing, golden scales marred by bruises and scuffs. This thing is harder to take down than I thought. She looked down at her claws. Or am I just not as strong as I thought I was? There was a sound of wing beats overhead. Kyoto! A familiar voice shouted, only barely audible over the footsteps of the zero-pointer. Shinosaki? Called Kiara, dumbfounded. She raised her head to see the black-furred Heteromorph skid to a halt at the rim of the crater her impact had made, Akane swooping down to land behind him after hauling him much of the way over. What are you doing? You should be out there earning points! You're risking your own sword to protect us. We wanted to give you a hand, Kurogane replied, waving his tail. Or a tail, I guess. Akane nodded. Yeah, exactly! We're heroes. Helping people is part of the job! Kyoto gave a sigh, slowly shaking her muzzle as she clawed her way up to the crater rim. I appreciate the sentiment, but I've already got enough points. I'm doing this so you can pass. Now get out of here before that thing catches up with us. Kurogane shook his head right back, mouth set and eyes filled with resolution. And that means I'm doing this so they can. This means as much to all of them as it does to me. I told Tentacle I wanted to use my power to protect everyone I could, and that includes their dreams. With that, he lunged forward and swiped his tail across Kiara's muzzle, painting a streak of purple liquid on his tip. Inhale! The dragon blinked, but breathed in. At first she was just confused by the peppermint scent, but then energy coursed through her muscles and veins, and she felt the strength to stand tall again. What the? No time to explain. You only have a minute tops before you go nose-wide into it. Make the most of it, Kurogane answered, stepping back. Kyoto gave a small chuckle as she stood up, spreading her wings to their full extent. Don't worry, I will. Kurogane and Akane raised their arms to shield themselves from the blowback as the dragon took off. Kyoto roared as she took to the air once more, feeling how much farther and faster her wings carried her as she speared towards the titanic zero-pointer's bulk, closing the distance between the two in seconds. The twitch of her wings sent her rolling to one side, dodging under one of its wings. He said I only have about a minute, so better make it count. Canting her wings, she used the added momentum to loop around the Colossus's shoulder, raking her claws across the massive joint before diving and spiraling around to make another pass. The huge machine swung at her once more, but she rolled sideways again, driving her claws into the hard plates that covered its arm. Pumping her wings and kicking off in the opposite direction of its swing, she roared with effort as she tore a trench from its wrist to its shoulder, sparks screeching as metal was rendered in two. A series of explosions burst from the ruptured wires in her wake, and the charred limb fell limp with a thud against the zero-pointer's side. The Colossus made a grinding sound in response and swung its whole body around to make another swipe, but she deftly wheeled out of the way with the boost of energy Kurogane's quirk had provided. Everyone here wants to be a hero, and so do I! She bellowed, pumping her wings to climb higher and higher, rolling away from the gigantic, swatting hand as she rose in the sky. So get out of our way! She roared, folding her wings and giving herself over completely to gravity, her momentum carrying her straight through the zero-pointer's extended and exposed elbow, severing it and sending the limb crashing through a nearby building. Arcing around, Kyoto banked in a loop, picking up altitude once more before turning into a stoop again. This time she ducked into a series of rapid front flips and slammed her tail down to the top of its head as hard as she possibly could, causing a small shockwave. The zero-pointer staggered back, helm-like plating crumpling from the force as sparks flew and smoke poured from the ruptured gaps around the joints. For a moment, it seemed like it would topple over, but though its legs swayed, they didn't buckle. The many-eyed titan stayed upright, facing off with the golden dragon even with one arm limp and the other detached. And that's it! Yelled President Mike's voice. Time's up! The baleful red glow of those dozens' eyes faded, and the titanic machine slumped, mangled fingers ranking on the asphalt as it deactivated. Kyoto gave a sigh as she hovered, licking at her claws. Dang it, I was actually hoping I'd be able to destroy it for a second. Guess even with Shirasaki's boost, I'm nowhere near you yet, sis. You would have taken it out with one hit. She smiled to sigh herself. Still, I did what I set out to do. Far below, Akane sat on his droid three-pointer, looking up at Kyoto's handiwork. Wow, I wish I was that strong. Kurogane panted, hands on his knees. Despite the frantic rush of the past minute, he'd been unable to land another point. Is 39 points enough? How many is enough? He looked up at the damaged zero pointer and the golden-winged, blue-garbed figure in the sky, and smiled. Still, feels good to know my power helped someone. 1 week later. Tamana flipped through the mail as she closed the front door, groaning at the address in one letter. Why does Yoshimi Villain Insurance keep trying to sell us a new package? We already got the one I wanted. The Wolverine heptamorph continued flipping through the letters, then gasped. The house shook at their footsteps as she barreled up the stairs to Kuragane's room at full speed. Kuragane! Kuragane jumped up from the easel he was sitting at, tail standing on end as 3 loud knocks rapped on his door. He'd nearly splattered paint all down his front with the brush he'd been using on the canvas in front of him. Mom? The door swung open, revealing the Shirasaki matriarch. She held out a letter with a familiar emblem emblazoned on it, seeming as nervous as Kuragane had been for the past week. It's from UA. Written across the back of the envelope was a big "For the applicant's eyes only" notice, so Tamana stepped out of the room after handing it to him, giving him a little smile and nod as she closed the door. Kuragane gingerly took it, set it down on his desk, and stared at it for a good few minutes. He fiddled with his tail as he thought about opening it, feeling sweat beading on his brow. I got a lot of points, but UA has such high standards. What if 50 points is the minimum requirement, or even 60? If I failed, I'll just try again next time, Kuragane muttered. Carefully, methodically, he released a puff of lavender mist from his tail, and sucked in a series of deep breaths. The scent was heavy in his lungs as he opened the letter and pulled out a small, flat hologram disc. A hologram projector? He located the activation button and pressed down on it, and a softly glowing, translucent recording of a hero he admired filled the room. The heteromorph in question was standing on an admittedly over-elaborate stage. Tentacle? Hello, Shirasaki. I don't think I need to introduce myself to you, the recording of Mezzo Shoji stated. His posture looked a little awkward, uncomfortable even, but the welcome in his eyes was genuine. Sorry it took so long to get back to you, but UA's admission process doesn't happen overnight. The tentacle hero looked at the camera that had clearly been recording this message. We have a lot of these videos to make, so we share the workload. When I remembered our conversation 5 years ago, I figured it'd be best if it was me to make yours. Kuragane stared blankly for a moment, starstruck. He remembered? To tell you the truth, it's still flattering to know I'm at least one person's favorite hero. One of Shoji's arms around the back of his head. But enough about that. I imagine you probably had a nerve-wracking week over this, so we'll get to the point. You passed the written test and got 39 combat points in the practical. That is a modest score. Modest. So not good, not terrible, Kuragane muttered. The standards must be pretty high if 39 is just modest. Here's hoping a C is enough. However, there's a few things you need to see first, Shoji explained, stepping aside to reveal a television behind him. Kuragane's eyes widened as he saw camera recordings of him protecting Akane, then giving the energy boost to that one boy. You see, we weren't just grading you on how many faux villains you could destroy. There's a lot more to being a hero than that. We're meant to save people, and that's even more important. So, we have rescue points. On the television screen, the recording changed to him charging back towards Kyoto, swiping his tail across her face to give her the buff she needed to hold off the zero-pointer. The image froze, and moved to show freeze frames of the other videos as well. The images lined up on the screen. You see, the judges were watching, and graded based on heroic acts outside of combat. A different number blinked onto the screen beneath each image. 5 points for saving Akane, 2 for helping the boy, and 20 for helping Kyoto, combining to a total of 27. The screen switched to a leaderboard displaying all the applicants' scores, with his in 7th place. Akane had still scored above him, in 5th place, and it was no surprise that Kyoto had scored first on the board. But just the fact that he'd made the top 10? Shoji gently took off his mask, revealing the scars Kuragane had asked to see all those years ago, which, perhaps ironically, owed themselves to the incident that inspired the older heteromorph to become a hero in the first place. Congratulations, Shirasaki Kuragane. You passed the exam. Salty tears pricked at the corner of Kuragane's eyes, wetting the fur on his cheeks. I look forward to seeing you at UA. The rest of the Shirasaki family stood outside the closed door, waiting with bated breath. Their eyes widened as it swung open. Kuragane emerged, hand on the knob, head down, breathing hard. Before he looked up at them, and they saw the smile on his face. I made it. The family collectively broke out in tears and cheers. Sakia made it to him first, enveloping him in a huge bear hug. Her little stinker made it! She cheered, spinning him around in her arms. Tamana stopped the spin with a hug of her own and kissed him on the forehead. I knew you could do it. I never doubted it. Kuroi came up behind the pair and patted his son on the shoulder. This calls for a celebration. How about we call the relatives and have a party? And with that, Shirasaki Kuragane became a member of UA and began his Hero Academia.